Hello, I'm Soycat and welcome back to the second channel geography video. This is Everyone's Favorite Series where I talk about geography and the world and stuff. And today I wanted to talk about Berlin and the Berlin Wall because as of today and any time going onwards from today, the Berlin Wall has now been knocked down for longer than it stood. That is a pretty interesting statistic, 28 years and 27 days in case you're curious, and that's a really good thing. And the reasons for that being a good thing is something you probably have a vague idea of, or maybe a really good idea if you're quite into that sort of stuff. But given that it wasn't really covered too much in my history experience, and given that I wanted to talk about the Berlin Metro, which is kind of related to that, today I'm going to be talking about the history of the Berlin Wall and also talking about how that affects the Berlin Metro, because Berlin as a city is kind of one that was pieced together just, less than 30 years ago from two entirely separate cities, East Berlin and West Berlin, and you can see that in so many different ways. Even to this day, you can see it by, looking at a map of the purchasing power, but you can also see it by literally looking at a map of it from the sky. There's West Berlin, there's East Berlin. You can see it in so many different ways, and I wanted to talk about some of those ways in today's video. But first, I need to explain the Berlin Wall because it wasn't explained to me. When I found this out, I was shocked, and for some number of you, some small percent of you, I feel like I should do the same because Berlin and so the Berlin Wall was built around West Berlin because obviously, like this map shows you, West Germany and East Germany weren't just the main two parts of the country. The capital was also split in two, which meant that West Germany had an exclave, which was of course West Berlin. And the interesting thing about West Berlin is it caused some serious issues for the East German government because so many, East Germans were leaving through that wall. So the Berlin Wall was not built around West Berlin because both sides had a disagreement and they're like, yeah, let's build a wall and see who likes it. It wasn't built to keep either side, necessarily, from both sides from having the other people come in. Instead, the Berlin Wall was built to stop the East Germans leaving their own country because just too many East Germans were trying to leave their own country. So they built a Berlin Wall, and they had a huge iron curtain, essentially like border points down the rest of it because they did not want any East Germans or any people from the Soviet bloc, the Warsaw Pact, leaving the communist side of Europe to go to the capitalist side instead. That is the level of the Berlin Wall that really needs to be driven home into people. That is a serious consequence of what happens when you have a seriously disastrous regime that just keeps trying to cover up for itself. And it even led to this map right. Wait, actually, I'll make sure I get the right map. It led to this map right here. This is the map that East Germans were given of their country. It's like, oh yeah, there's just that giant hole over there. Don't worry about that. And I don't know. There's something about this that if you care about information and the free flow of oh yeah, well I mean that's not a good thing, right? Pretending that it just doesn't exist. And the reasons for it are a bit more complex than that. It's basically why do you need to know about West Berlin if you can't go there? But I still do think well, but then on the other hand, you have to pretend to your citizens that this really this more prosperous part of the country didn't exist just to keep them in. And there's something about that that's just a little bit stark that you should know about before we go into the rest of this video, because it's important to realize that the Berlin Wall was built for that reason, which meant that the Berlin Metro, which up until the building of the Berlin Wall, a little bit before the Berlin Wall because they started increasing security before even then. Oh, by the way, the last thing that really shocked me, this was next level of oh yeah, so it's kind of shocking that they had to build a wall to keep East Germans from going into another country, keeping their own citizens in, but also so they put sand in. There was two Berlin Walls. They put sand between the walls because they wanted to ensure that if footsteps were found, because any guard that saw someone was meant to shoot them on sight to deter people. If a guard didn't shoot someone on sight, he would be shot because they'd be able to see the footprints and they wouldn't see the body. And it's man, that is next level of oh yeah, so we want to stop people from leaving our country, and even then still too many people are leaving our country, so we'll shoot them, and then too many people are not shooting the people, so we're gonna have to have a shooting process on that. That's the levels this goes up on. And again, it's why I think there's a real lack of education about how communism in Europe went. Again, have your own arguments how it works today, but how it went historically, pretty bad things. I want to just get that out of the way so we can address the rest of this video, which is about the Berlin Metro, which is a way cheerier subject than people being shot because they won't shoot people. So with that said, let's talk about the Berlin Metro. It seems really evil to laugh at oh, shooting off shooting, but again, it seems so far removed because to this day now Berlin is it's starting to become one of the hubs of Europe, even though like I mentioned before, it's one of the few capital cities in Europe which does statistically lower than the rest of the country. Again, you can see here, even though Berlin, and especially the western side of Berlin, is just about red, it's still on the lower end of the West German spectrum. It's not as rich as Hamburg by any measure. It's not as rich as Bavaria. It's not as rich as Hessen. It's not as rich as the Nord that area, let's just say, the Cologne metro, the Cologne, Dusseldorf, Wuppertal, etc. Metropolitan area. It's not as prosperous as any of the other major regions of Germany because, again, half of it, but the communist side of Germany is just, I mean, it doesn't, look at the map. draw your own conclusions, I guess, is my best way to say that. And let's instead talk about the metro system of Germany, because Berlin, if you've ever been, has one of the messiest metro systems in the world. I had a whole video ranting about like some metro systems I really love. The maps are really great, but let's talk about the East Berlin metros, because I guess the Berlin metro, because while the country was divided, it looked something like this. So this is the East German metro. This is a Wikipedia map, and here is the most fascinating thing, because again, it's the same story with the map thing, where like, oh yeah, this is just all the metro you need to know. There's nothing west of there, whereas the West German or West Berlin government map tends to had this instead. So as you can see, it has all the lines there, and then there are some lines which are grayed out. They were the later East German lines, where it just writes down there, in case you can't read German in small text, it says just about like only trains by the, I guess, the Eastern BVG, which is the train company for Berlin, the transport company. And yeah, I don't know, it's always interesting to me. Like, I feel like the side that has to hide information usually has more things going wrong with it, right? Like, I feel like if you give the information out there, like, oh yeah, so you can pretend there's no map, or you can pretend there's a thing there. So anyway, just interesting little story. That's like that. After the Berlin Wall was erected, after the capital was split in two, they had to kind of take up different lines each, and in a really interesting show, though, a lot of these lines, which ran exclusively in West Berlin, were ran by the East German train company, and so in some cases it happened in reverse, where the West Germans were running trains into East Germany, because again, I guess East Berlin, because again, splitting a city into two has a lot of disastrous consequences, which is why the city to this day is kind of messy like that. But I still don't think that's necessarily an excuse. For one, the fact that the trains, even to this day, they look really old. So I've been to Berlin only the one time, so I'm not a Berlin resident, let me clarify. I live in London, the United Kingdom. Different city, different capital. But first of all, the trains look really rough. I mean, here's one of them being off the tracks just to make it look really extra bad. But no, in all seriousness, like, I mean, looking at the trains on the network, there's just something like sad about them. They remind me a lot of like, like a Ukraine or a Moscow metro, which maybe that's a thing you like, but it's not something I'm really on board with. And then also, here's what the map looks like to this day. As you can see, map of the Berlin transport system, and it's long story short here is it's just a bit of a mess, right? And I don't this isn't necessarily to do with the reunification, but I did want to criticize it nonetheless, because there's a lot of like nice maps in the world, a lot of nice metro maps, even some in Germany, but this is like the trickiest map to navigate for a whole bunch of different reasons actually. So when I said that Berlin was divided east to west, this actually leads to a bunch of interesting situations to this day where they have two airports. I know like some cities have many, like maybe 6 in like London, but it means there's 2 airports, and interestingly enough, so again, there's Tegel to the north, which is the traditional, Tegel's always tricky to find, but there's Tegel to the north, which is of course over, I'm gonna have to type this one in, there's Berlin-Tegel Airport, which is found just over here. And this is the one that all the traditional carriers fly to. And then, funnily enough, the East German airport, there's just something about this that I find interesting, at the very least, is the fact that the East German airport, Schönfeld, actually became known as the, budget airline. So, if you fly with a Ryanair and EasyJet, you fly to here. If you fly with Lufthansa, you'll probably fly to Tegel. And it's just interesting that it develops that way, where the budget airport becomes the thing. But both airports are horribly connected to the public transport system. So, this map right here, which looks like it covers everything for miles around Germany, 1, doesn't include all the S-Bahn lines, like some of them go way off the top of the map. 2, includes a bunch of regional trains. Like, if we look up close at this, it gets just as tricky to, understand exactly what's going on here. Like, wait, what? And, I know, I'm just saying, I had a lot of issues when I was hopping around the thing. So, there you go. Fun fact. There's the German metro. It's a little bit tricky, to say the least. Like, just look. I end up at Ostkreuz a bunch of times, I remember. And just, I know, my point being is getting from anywhere to anywhere, I'm not sure why the lines were built, but because they were constrained, I guess, there's a lot of issues going from north to south properly. Getting from Tegel to the rest of the city, you have to take a bus onto like an S-Bahn. To get from Schönfeld to the rest of the country, you can't probably see it here, you have to take a S-Bahn onto a U-Bahn, and then I think I had to also take like another couple of U-Bahns. Basically, my point with this is that the the transport network really sucks in Berlin, but on the plus side, because it's so old and because it's like not so well funded or monitored or whatever, it's 1, pretty cheap, and 2, it's really easy to ride on the roofs of all the carts. So if you ever see, you'll notice like, this might look familiar to you, these trains right here. You see them in a bunch of the videos where people surf on the top of subway cars because they're not electrified from the top. I don't know how they're electrified, honestly. And that means that you can ride on the top from station to station. So, I don't know. There you go. There's the Berlin. There's the thing about the Berlin Wall you need to know. You can see it clearly on a map to this day, which is kind of crazy. If you want to go see the Berlin Wall, because this is, you know, some people watch these videos because they're like, oh, I want to learn about a place that I might travel. The interesting thing about the Berlin Wall is it's really tricky to find like modern day parts of it. It's been pretty much entirely destroyed with just a few exceptions. You can see a tiny part of it at Checkpoint Charlie, although like Checkpoint Charlie is just the middle of a street. Like if you ever saw my Berlin video, which I'm not even sure if I uploaded actually, but if you look at Checkpoint Charlie, it's just like the middle of a street. Also, Germany Google Maps really sucks because every building's blurred, or like every other building's blurred. It's terrible. There's a couple of other places you can see it. There's a really famous street where I recorded the video actually, just over here, where you can go check it out. But yeah, my point with all of this video is that I like Berlin, but the Berlin getting around Berlin is really tricky because, like, look at this on Google Maps too. It's just like, ah. You know, I'm just saying, get someone to design a nice map or a nice transport system, and I'm on board with you. So I'm sorry if you're in Berlin and you watch this video, but I hope you all enjoyed it regardless, because Berlin has been destroyed for as many days. Oh, sorry, the Berlin Wall. I mean, Berlin itself is doing okay. It's been destroyed for as many times as as many days as it's been up right now. And yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting seeing a city that was divided by two and then had to come together. Like having all those tendrils of the network have to be cut off and then re-put on again. You know, like all the different lines, for instance. Having, you know, all the different bus net, like it's interesting seeing a city like that still combined, and you even see it's this day where the East German side is a lot cheaper to go eat. So fun fact, there you go. There's some more travel advice for Berlin. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I hope it didn't come across as just being mean to Berlin, because you know I feel like looking at this map, like someone deserves to be mean to it. But maybe you love it. Maybe this is your favorite map in the world. It has all the details you need about. Like, seriously, look at this. Like, I just don't get any of it. It's too much. You need to chill. Because even if the Berlin regular map, it just looks kind of plain and missing. Because you have to take S-Bahn. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Second channel. Don't care. Goodbye.